Welcome back to the McLaren Thought Leadership Centre and CNN Inspirations. I'm Max Foster. This hour, we are travelling with you to the future to explore how technology is transforming our lives, affecting the way we think, the way we travel, the way we dress, and the way we eat. Now, my next guest is a pioneer in food technology who's creating a stir with his contentious and carnivorous cuisine. Forget the farms, the forests and the fields. He's growing meat straight out of a laboratory. And here's a taste of what's to come. Our food has always depended on technology. As kitchens change, so do our tastes. And so the journey from farms to our forks changes too. Now, food has never been more abundant, nor are production methods so advanced. But with the world's population set to hit almost 10 billion by 2050, the strain on the world's resources has never been greater. As our demand for meat soars, technology is catching up. But can it compete with the natural world? That's the question. Please welcome my next guest, Professor Mark Post. He's the maker of the world's first lab-grown stem cell burger. Let's go first to an image of one of your burgers. It's quite extraordinary. My first question is it meat?
Yes, it is. It's just grown in a different way, but the material is exactly the same. So
how's it grown?
It's grown from stem cells. So we take a small sample from a cow that has a couple of stem cells in it. They can expand, so we can let them grow and divide almost indefinitely, so that we can, from a very small sample, make thousands and thousands of kilos of beef. Then, once we have enough cells, we let them form muscle tissue, which they can pretty much do by themselves. They do that in our body when they repair muscle tissue, but they can also do that, let's say, in a Petri dish.
OK, let's take our audience into your lab for a moment. Well, it's incredible to think that it's possible. Why are you doing it? Just explain the reason you went to this enormous lengths to try to do this.
Yeah, it's mainly concern about food security and environmental issues and also animal welfare. So many people don't know that, but in order to grow a kilo of beef through a cow, we need 15,000 liters of water, a tremendous amount of land, and a tremendous amount of energy. That and a tremendous amount of food, too. We waste basically almost 85% of all our food by having the cow as an intermediate to convert, in my sort of idea, vegetable proteins in its diet to animal proteins in our diet. And that's a terribly inefficient way of doing things.
So animals are an inefficient way of producing meat, is what
they are a very inefficient technology, if you would call it that way.
Are you appealing to vegetarians who are vegetarians for moral reasons?
I guess we are. I talk a lot to vegetarians, and some of them express really sort of a gratitude that finally they can eat meat again if this comes to reality. This is not our primary target. Our primary target is the 95% of the hardcore meat eaters that are currently, unfortunately, associated with that food insecurity and that environmental issue.
Well, let's see what a couple of them think of your meat, because we've got a video here of a taste test. Was it the first taste test?
Well, the first taste test outside of our own team, yes.
On TV?
Yes.
Can you do the honours and lift the lid on your creation?
Yeah.
The consistency is perfect. There's really a bite to it.
The texture, the mouthfeel has a feel like meat.
I know there's no fat in it, so I didn't really know how juicy it will be. But there's quite some intense taste.
The bite, feels like a conventional hamburger.
They're quite baffled, aren't they, by the whole experience? They're trying to understand what they're doing. But be honest with us, how does it taste?
Pretty much like what they said. You recognize that it is meat, definitely, no question. There was not any fat tissue in it, so it was dry. It was also very expensive.
Yes. So what's the cost? What were the costs of the early burgers?
That hamburger costed us about €250,000.
So when we talk about whether or not it's scalable, how on earth are you going to get the price down from that?
Well, by scaling up production, basically.
Yes.
So, and also improving the technology. So we now know with exactly the same technology, without any improvements, if we scale up production, we would be able to produce it at about €60 for a kilo.
How quickly?
Probably in the next 3 years.
But how long does a burger take to create?
About 8 to 9 weeks. Which is actually faster than a cow.
Are you able to get that down?
No, we're not, and we don't need to, because time is not really. I mean, we're not going to ask a farmer how long it takes to grow a cauliflower, right? Because you grow many in parallel and you adjust it to the demand. That's exactly what's going to happen.
I'm fascinated to know what Samuel thinks of this, whether he would ever eat one.
Yeah, why not? I already eat plenty of burgers anywhere else, so I would try it. But it's interesting because we're talking about the altruistic reasons for making this. I know that Lewis has a question about how it could affect hunger.
Is this envisioned as a way of supplementing current food production methods, or is it a method in its own right? What scale can it realistically be achieved on in the future?
Well, that's going to replace the entire meat production in the world, which is massive. It's going to take a long time.
But it can be done.
It can be done, for sure. And if a lot of companies put their shoulders underneath it, it will happen. It can happen quickly. But it is a massive undertaking, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, Samuel, I think we should do our own experiment and just ask people if they would eat one of these burgers if they were offered one now, here. Hands up, if you would. Samuel, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say it looks like most people. Monica, you didn't raise your hand. Why wouldn't you eat it?
I would eat it after 10 years and see the side effects.
You want us to be the guinea pigs first. Thanks for that.
That's a smart attitude, I think, yes.
Jean, you were one of the people that raised your hands and said that you would eat it. So why would you eat it, unlike the woman sitting next to you, Monica, who said she wouldn't?
I just want to try the new invention and see how it goes.
Because out of taste or just out of pure curiosity?
Pure curiosity.
Oh, you're like me. Also, we have a question up here from Mohammed.
What are the ethical issues with lab-grown food?
That's a big one, ethical issues.
I see mostly ethical benefits of this because we don't need to kill animals and we are not destroying our planet and we are using our resources efficiently. Of course, there are always, I mean, if this happens, it's very disruptive to the current meat production. So, yes, farmers will need to rethink what they're growing on their fields if it's not grass. Slaughterhouses probably need to rethink their profession. So there are, inevitably some consequences for society.
But ultimately, we could see this appearing on tables and in restaurants in future. This is a burger. It looks just like any other burger. And you must have, big companies looking at this thinking, this is the future, and actually there's a lot of money in this potentially. Have you got companies coming to you wanting to invest and offering you huge amounts of money?
Not quite yet, but we, interestingly, so there are now 7 startup companies. When we started, we were the only one. And these startup companies are now getting investment from large meat industries like Tyson and Cargill, European meat processors. So the industry is getting word of this and getting interested and want to be at some point.
So it's speeding up a lot, the process is speeding up a lot.
And that would not only speed up the process, but also create more sort of trust in this system. Yes. And we originally thought as the traditional meat industries as potential sort of people blocking this new development, but it turns out that they are going to adopt it.
Professor Mark Post, thank you very much indeed. It's absolutely fascinating, kind of mind-boggling at the same time. But up next, we take you from the kitchen to the catwalk for an exciting look at the future of fashion. Meet the designer whose clothes can read our minds and tell others what we're thinking. That's next on CNN's Our Future World. Welcome back to the McLaren Thought Leadership Centre. I'm Max Foster. For this edition of CNN Inspirations, we're on an adventure to our future world. Transporting us there are four technology trailblazers, groundbreaking experts in driverless cars, artificial intelligence and cutting-edge cuisine. My next guest, though, is a creator of fun, fabulous, futuristic fashion, who fuses clothes and technology together in the ultimate celebration of style and self-expression. Before we meet her, let's take a look at how we developed our passion for fashion.
A sense of style never goes out of fashion. Evolving with changing times, our clothes express our identity and our place in the world.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Fast forward, and fashion meets technology, reading our heartbeat, our footsteps, and even our emotions. Expect technology to change the way we look and the message it sends to the world. Will we be wearing our hearts on our sleeves?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome fashion tech designer Anouk Wipprecht. Fashion tech, how would you define it?
It's a combination or the marriage between technology and fashion. So working with electronics, working with sensors, and also working with the body.
And you're originally from the fashion industry, the fashion world. So how did you move into the tech side?
Yeah, I came from traditional fashion, like couture and tailoring. So really how you construct and make a garment. And when I was 17 years old, I got interested in something else. And that was robotics. So I started to combine the robotics and the fashion. And yeah, that is what I do ever since.
Well, we need to show people the spider dress because it's incredible. Explain the spider dress. What's it for you?
Yeah, the spider dress is a robotic dress which has mechanic limbs on the shoulders, and it has proximity sensors in the front. So it's basically sensing the spaces in front. So when you step into the personal space of this dress, it's attacking you.
We have one, of course, like any good fashion show. And I'm going to try it by walking forward. The sensors are at the front, aren't they?
Yeah. So if you step into the personal space, which you do now, you can enter, then it's reacting to you.
But it's doing different movements. Is that random, or is
Correct. No, I always say, like, designing something to do just one thing would be boring. So I equipped it with something that I call 12 states of behavior. So depending on how you walk into this design, into the space, it's reacting differently to you.
So it's about invading someone's space, or what's it saying for you?
It's about the notion of invading. It's also the notion of protecting, and it's actually a robotic system on the body which is acting on your behalf. It is, as it is a defense mechanism, it is doing this notion for you.
So do you get interesting responses when you put it on a model, for example, who would never have been in anything like this before?
Yeah, what I mostly do is I do not maybe tell my model what it's going to do or any of these dresses. I have in total 40 dresses that are all doing something different. And for me, putting it on a model and not telling it brings up interesting conversations, because she's stepping in to a space, for example, with this robotic system. Yeah, that's for me, like, for me, seeing the wearer being adapting to the system, like understanding what it does and then sort of react with it. It forms a sort of an coexistence, like a symbiotic relationship between her and the system, sort of, you know. And this is something that I'm looking after, like, what is this new relationship that we're going to have with technology?
What is it?
I think a wearable one. I'm super interested in that. I think, like, we are now having technology in our hands, for example. It's not listening to our bodies. Often technology came into our lives and it is ending up as a token for stress, a compass for stress. If I open up my mobile phone, I get almost a heart attack by the amount of notifications that it's giving to me. So how can these technologies, instead of being in your hands, how can they live on your body?
A lot of your creation is quite animalistic, if I can call it that. Why is that? Is that just an interest of yours, or does it need to be?
I do a lot with something called biomimicry, so mimicking nature. And that you can do in design. You can also look at how, for example, the behavior of nature is, how things are growing, how they are communicating, and especially animals. I think they're really interesting. Like, the way animals react is very intuitive, whether we are very rational, right? We are taught certain rules and how to behave, sort of. And this more intuitive character that animals have when they communicate and express themselves, I think that is really interesting. So this is something that I put into my systems.
On that basis, you could create a hat that looks like a unicorn.
Yeah, this is Agent Unicorn. So this is a unicorn horn with a camera in there, and it's created
There's a camera in the front.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. This is the prototype, and there's a little camera in the front, and it's measuring EEG, so it's measuring the brain signals. And I created that for kids with ADHD, children that are a little bit more excited for the world than other people might be. And I think, like, what we do now is giving children medication, and I think that's a really bad thing.
But what do they feel? So if they get excited, what do they feel?
They do not feel anything, but the little camera in the unicorn horn is recording everything what happens around them as soon as they get excited. So you read that back with them, so they can see that everything and anything around them has an effect on them, sort of.
Where's Samuel?
Right here, Max. So Monica and I are watching this, and like her, I'm also wondering about the cost.
Would this be at a cost that everyone could afford?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm doing is, like, 3D printing. 3D printing gets
these
more
are made
and
by
more.
3D printing.
Yeah, everything here is made using 3D modeling techniques and software and 3D printing. 3D printing gets cheaper and cheaper. That is cool. The other thing what I do a lot is open sourcing my design. So often my designs you can find online on websites like Instructables, and there's the file online, the code is online, and also do it yourself on how to create that design, sort of. So I think, like, a lot of more open source initiatives are gonna come around and are around that really will influence the way we use devices, and we can build our own devices, for example.
Your next suit is coming, Samuel.
That's right. Salma here has a question about the greater good, possibly.
What scenario could you picture the dress helping in?
I think, for me, for example, the notion of fashion is all about expression, and it is about communication, so how we express ourselves and how we can communicate. That can be personality, that can be culturally, whatever that can be. And the fashion that we're creating until today has been analog. It has just been cloth and fabric. So where's this new notion and this new sense in where this fabric and the things that we are wearing become interactive, they become sensoric, and they become sensitive to our needs.
Uzma has a question.
What inspired you to become a fashion tech designer?
That's simple. I love fashion and I love robotics. So it's the combination, I guess.
It can only be one thing. We need to talk about cocktail dresses.
Yeah.
Because when we think of a cocktail dress, we think of one thing, but you don't. You think of something completely different. It's quite literal, actually.
So this is a pretty simple show of what you can do with technology. What I have here is liquid, so a liquid drink and a peristaltic pump on the back. And as soon as I push here on the button, it serves you a little cocktail shot. So I created this design for a restaurant in Ibiza. It's called Heart Ibiza from Cirque du Soleil. So in the restaurant, these dresses are walking around in multiple colors and serving these drinks.
Do you think that changes the relationship between the waitress and the customers?
Well, one thing is the waitress doesn't have to go back to the bar, I guess, to refill the drink. I think having such a spectacle while surfing or thinking of new ways that food can be served. Yeah. I'm super interested in that, whether that is a wearable thing, whether that is a robot, whether that is whatever that can be, whatever we can do with technology, right?
Can I just ask you about a couple of ethical questions? I know that might sound a bit boring, but you do have cameras, you do have sensors on these things, and you are monitoring other people around the people wearing them, and you haven't asked their permission. Yeah. So is that an issue?
That can be an issue, especially working with cameras is a big issue because what you say, it's very intrusive, right? One of the things that I'm working with devices, it's in a closed room, for example, the unicorn horn. What I'm using for the spider dress, it's not a camera, it is a proximity sensor. It's an ultrasonic rangefinder. So it's basically beaming out and it's getting something back, but it's not a camera.
Identify the person.
Yeah. And me as a researcher, I just see a blob coming in and going out. So it's a little bit working around this notion of maybe not using a camera, but what can be non-intrusive that you can put in your design that might do the same.
Well, Samuel's always dealing with these privacy issues and technology. What do you think?
Well, I always say if it can connect to the internet, it can be hacked. There's nothing that it's 100%. So if it's not 100%, you have to worry about it. But I don't think it's just going to be these dresses. I think it's everything around us. And speaking of that, Nasser has a question about where all of this is headed.
Hi, Nick. Where do you see fashion tech in the next 30 years?
30 years?
Yeah.
In the next 30 years, it will be wild. I think in the next 5 years, things and these ideas, I think it merges much more into accessories. It goes much more into our bags, our jewelry, but also in the textiles, textile and e-textiles are really interested in integrating little sensors or little actuators and electronics in there, so you can have fabrics that can listen to your body, for example, and what does that open up? I think it's much sooner than 30 years.
Brilliant. There's something really captivating about it, and I thank you very much indeed for bringing it all along for us. Sadly, our journey to the future is almost over. I want to thank our incredible guests for being with us. Robot designer Dr. David Hansen, Citroën CEO Linda Jackson, our futuristic food aficionado Professor Mark Post, and fashion tech designer Anouk Wipprecht. Now, thank you all for joining us as well in this exciting, rare glimpse into our future world. Thank you, Samuel, for gathering great questions from our great audience, and to our viewers. We appreciate you joining us here at the McLaren Thought Leadership Centre. I'm Max Foster. Goodbye.